Today's service leader is Ghana Imani Hylton, a lay leader from the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Montclair. Ghana spent 20 years as a human resource director and event planner in New York City. She is currently the director of campus inclusion and scheduling and operations at a university, where she writes the weekly diversity, equity, and inclusion newsletter for multiple campuses, facilitating heritage celebrations like Black History Month and Women's History, and teaching anti-racism classes, as well as overseeing 2 event spaces. She received the Outstanding Faculty Advisor Award in 2021 for her work with a sorority, and was recognized by the NSPA African American Knowledge Community as a stellar 50th recipient. In her personal life, get this, Ghana is a published writer and a poet who wrote her first book at 8 years old. Ghana was raised celebrating Kwanzaa since birth and is named after the 7th principle. She has taught Kwanzaa at schools, community centers, universities, and for city celebrations in both New York City and Essex County, New Jersey. Ghana is very involved in her religious community, heading the Religious Education Committee and teaching the Coming of Age high school group. She would like to pursue a Master of Divinity and has already given several homilies, sermons, within her congregation. Ghana's passions are social justice, writing, music, education, inclusive leadership, women's empowerment, and addressing the intersectionality of racism, sexism, and other oppressions. She returned to her hometown of Montclair after several decades in Brooklyn, New York, where she met her husband. They are now raising 3 children together.
That was even more breathtaking than I imagined it. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. The theme from E.T. Whew. Okay, opening words for today come from Fannie Lou Hamer. None of us are free until all of us are free. We come together today in this room, in this place, just specks in this vast universe, but not insignificant at all. We ask that we humbly listen more than we speak, that we be accountable more than we ask for forgiveness, and that we take on a spirit of openness and learning more than we hide behind knowing everything already. May it be so. We have 2 very quick readings today, because when I'm brief, I'm brief. The first is from the Bible, Matthew 25:35. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. The second is a more modern reading from E.T. the movie. Mary, the mom, says, if you ever see it again, whatever it is, don't touch it. Just call me and we'll have somebody come and take it away. And little Gertie says, like the dog catcher? And Elliot realizes, No, but they'll give it a lobotomy or do experiments on it or something. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right. I like a lively crowd because I'm a lively person, if you haven't been able to tell already. Thank you for hosting me and welcoming me so warmly. I don't know if you've noticed lately, but recently the government of the United States of America has been bringing up UFOs and aliens. Were you aware of this? Well, if you didn't hear it, let me tell you. After decades upon decades of denying Area 51 and alien sightings, now the government had a hearing in July of 2023 where 3 military veterans testified in Congress. A former Air Force intelligence officer claimed the US government has operated a secret multi-decade reverse engineering program of recovered vessels. He also said that the US has recovered non-human biologics from alleged crash sites. I tell you, when I heard that, I stopped in my tracks. Now we're going to admit that there are aliens? A year earlier, in June 2022, NASA got an independent expert panel together to help study UAPs. It's not really UFOs anymore. It's unidentified anomalous phenomena. I liked UFO better, but whatever. This panel advises the Department of Defense on how to gather and interpret data. Democrats and Republicans in recent years have pushed and paid for more research on the basis that this could be a national security matter. They're concerned that sightings observed by pilots, etc., may be tied to US adversaries. Dun, dun, dun. CBS News stated, lawmakers have also called for a centralized reporting system for both military and civilian reports of UFOs to better analyze and understand the possible threat. Ooh, a possible threat. I thought about how Hollywood portrays some of these possible threats, from Invader of the Body Snatchers to War of the Worlds, They Live, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, The Thing, that's one of my favorites, A Space Odyssey, all the alien movies with Sigourney Weaver, A Quiet Place, scary, and one of my favorites, Independence Day. It was fun. Those movies definitely emphasized the threat theory of aliens arriving on Earth, except for one, E.T. the Extraterrestrial by Steven Spielberg. One of the reasons E.T. was such a hit, I think, was that it was a very different spin on a story about aliens visiting Earth. So for people in the audience that may have missed E.T., in E.T., aliens secretly visit the Earth at night to gather plant specimens in a California forest. One of them gets separated from the group, and when the US government vehicles arrive and search the area, the aliens quickly leave, and poor E.T. is left behind, later discovered by a young Elliot who tries to help him go home. E.T. surpassed Star Wars to become the highest grossing film of all time, a record it held for 11 years until Spielberg's own movie, Jurassic Park, surpassed it. The producer of E.T., Kathleen Kennedy, noted that an important theme of the film is tolerance, which would show up again as a theme in future Spielberg films, such as Schindler's List. Spielberg himself described E.T. as a minority story. Isn't that interesting? Suggesting that the story's central alien-human friendship is an analogy for how real-world adversaries can learn to overcome their differences. Now that's a sweet thought. But is it something we humans can really handle? Author and scientist Arthur C. Clarke wrote, "Two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying." Whether you believe in aliens or not, we do have some substantive data to suggest, to digest, when we talk about potential adversaries, something other than what we're used to. We've got this data over and over and over again, so let's get into it. Excerpt: The Diary of Anne Frank. Countless friends and acquaintances have been taken off to a dreadful fate. Night after night, green and gray military vehicles cruise the streets. They knock on every door, asking whether any Jews live there. If so, the whole family is immediately taken away, diary. If not, they proceed to the next house. It's impossible to escape their clutches unless you go into hiding. They often go around with lists, knocking only on those doors where they know there's a big haul to be made. They frequently offer a bounty, so much per head. It's like the slave hunts of the olden days. I feel wicked sleeping in my warm bed while somewhere out there my dearest friends are dropping from exhaustion or being knocked to the ground. I get frightened when I think of close friends who are now at their mercy, and all because they are Jews. The Middle Passage. This is an excerpt from PBS series. Africans were often treated like cattle across the crossing. On the slave ships, people were stuffed between decks in spaces too low for standing. The heat was often unbearable, and the air nearly unbreathable. Women were often used. Men were often chained in pairs, shackled wrist to wrist or ankle to ankle. People were crowded together, usually forced to lie on their backs with their heads between the legs of others. In such cramped quarters, disease such as smallpox and yellow fever spread like wildfire. The diseased were sometimes thrown overboard to prevent wholesale epidemics. Because a small crew had to control so many, cruel measures such as iron muzzles and whippings were used to control enslaved people. Over the centuries, between 1 and 2 million persons died in the crossing. This meant that the living were often chained to the dead until ship surgeons had the corpses thrown overboard. While ships were still close to shore, insurrections of desperate Africans sometimes broke out. Many went mad in these barbaric conditions. Others chose to jump to their watery deaths rather than endure. Excerpt: Bloody Sunday, North Ireland, 1972. About 15,000 people gathered in the morning of January 30th to take part in a civil rights march. After prolonged skirmishes between groups of youth and the army, soldiers from the British Parachute Regiment moved in to make arrests. Stones were thrown, and soldiers responded with rubber bullets, tear gas, etc. 2 men were shot and wounded. Then at least 21 British soldiers opened fire on civilians, discharging 108 live rounds between them. 13 people were shot dead and at least 15 others injured when members of the army opened fire on the civil rights demonstrators. Eyewitness Father Edward Daly said no warning was given to any civilians before the soldiers opened fire, and none of the soldiers fired in response to attacks by stone throwers. There were no guns fired at the army beforehand, he said. This is an occasion that I saw completely from the start with my own eyes. Jack Duddy, who was 17 years old, became the first person to be killed on Bloody Sunday. Images of Father Daly waving a handkerchief as he led a group of men carrying Duddy's body were broadcast around the world. Hugh McMonigal was among those carrying Duddy's body. I have seen wars on the TV, but that gun battle on that day on Chamberlain Street scared me. We were walking and could hear bullets whizzing past us. I shouted to a soldier to do something, and his reaction was to clap his hands. To this day, I still hear that. Excerpt: The Rwanda Genocide, Tutsi versus Hutu. I was in Bangladesh when the genocide started. This is a survivor named Balansi. I had a very difficult time. I saw my family killed. I was still a child when many of my elders were killed. Those who lived in the interior of Rwanda tried to reach churches. Those who had sought sanctuary in the churches thought they would not be attacked because in the first killing of the Tutsis in 1959, no one was attacked in churches. This time was different. In the beginning, they killed mainly the men. The girls and the women were taken by Hutu who did what they wanted with them. In time, many of them were killed too, as the orders came through to eliminate all. The situation improved when the French troops arrived in town as the Hutu were fleeing to the Congo. The survivors were obligated to live in the houses of those who had fled the country while they waited to return to their own houses, which had been destroyed during the genocide. Numerous survivors were traumatized, and their problems were many. I saw a Hutu who I thought was traumatized too. He had killed many Tutsi. He always had a skull in his right hand. He kept saying things without any meaning. I learned that we cannot have faith in a man. I know priests, even a bishop, involved in the killings. Normally, I thought they were the God's representatives on earth. Is it God that gave them this mission? Certainly not. Given those excerpts, you may have surmised at this point that I'm talking about the first principle for UUs, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Or it may be our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Maybe even our sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Some might think it's even closer to the eighth principle about journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. It's way bigger than our UU principles and our UU beliefs. In Judaism, the Torah says that you must never look down or mistreat anyone. Treat strangers with kindness and love themselves as ourselves. This commandment is mentioned 36 times, more than any other commandment in the Torah. Leviticus 19:34, the alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. Buddhist primary principle is that there's no agenda other than to help someone. Buddhists attempt to show loving kindness towards others and themselves without expecting anything in return. It is important to Buddhists to work on a selfless attitude to combat, as they see it, the three poisons of ignorance, greed, and hatred. To Buddhists, all people are equal. Christians say in Romans 13, 8 and 10, owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves one another has fulfilled the law. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. In the Quran, Muslims are taught that everyone's God-given human dignity must be respected, regardless of his or her faith, race, ethnic origin, gender, or social status. It's not just us. Human kindness is interwoven in the religion of those who are religious and in the ethics for those who are not. So why in the world do we keep othering each other? The question of whether or not we are alone in the universe doesn't matter as long as we continue to treat other humans as if they are not human at all. I care more about how you treat the person sitting right next to you, across from you, behind you, in front of you, and I hope you do too. We must care more about how we treat our neighbors, co-workers, family and friends, and the strangers you come across in our community, rather than speculate about some bug-eyed, slimy alien in the sky. They're not coming here because they see how we doing each other. Do you know New Jersey has the fourth highest number of hate groups in the country? Anytime someone says you people, every time we separate races, cultures, religions, sexual orientation, political views, social economic groups, even age groups, and say, well, you know, they're Black, they're Protestant, they're Hispanic, they're poor, they're Muslim, they're women, they're Jews, they're trans, they're atheist. That's how they do things. We are othering people, and it's wrong. This is the time of year when many Americans take a day off. We get a day off. I love the day off, to remember a baby being born. But after his birth, we forget his simple, middle-class, Middle Eastern parents had to leave their home to seek sanctuary from a crazy king who had ordered that all the baby boys in their hometown be murdered. Jesus' parents, Joseph and Mary, fled to Egypt, where they were probably thought of as like asylum seekers that we think about today. Either way, they became strangers, struggling to get by in a foreign land. Yet here we are today, still struggling with othering those who are fleeing from turmoil. Have we not learned? Have we not connected the dots? After incident upon incident upon incident? Two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. Well, we are not alone. But I tell you, we're not together either. And if we continue to other each other, to divide and conquer, we never will be. The great civil rights leader, Fannie Lou Hamer, noted that nobody's free until everybody's free. So even as you are without chains, without border confinements, without war, free to practice your religion, free to not have one, free to believe in God, free to not believe in God, remember that nobody is free until everybody is free. I'd like you to reflect for a moment. How can we stop othering humans and start reconnecting with our human kindness. I ask that you reflect on the words of Fannie Lou Hamer and use this holiday season to reconnect with our human kindness. May it be so. Blessed be.